Welcome to One-on-One with Walt Laskos. In this brief podcast, you'll learn how to most effectively address senior financial exploitation. Now, here's Walt.
Greetings, everyone. Hey, today we'll hear all about the resources provided by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that pertain to keeping older adults safe from financial scams and fraud. You know, if you didn't hear, the month of June, and in particular June 15th, marks the worldwide observance of Elder Abuse Awareness. In recognition of that observance, I thought it best to zero in on all the resources that are available to older adults, and their caregivers, and their family members on the topic of scams and fraud prevention. As a senior, I have to say we have many resources at our disposal, and we need to take advantage of them. In our last podcast, we heard from AARP and all the services and information they provide. And today, to help us learn about the resources provided by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, we have as my guest, Kate Kramer. Kate is a policy analyst in the CFPB's Office for Older Americans. Kate, let's begin our conversation by having you provide our listeners with a general overview of the CFPB. What does the CFPB do for consumers?
Thanks so much for having me, Walt. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is a federal agency that implements and enforces federal consumer financial laws. We protect consumers from unfair, deceptive, or abusive practices and take action against companies that break the law. We arm people with the information, the steps, and the tools that they need to make smart financial decisions. And addressing fraud and scams and other financial exploitation is one of our goals at the CFPB. Now, I'm part of CFPB's Office for Older Americans, as you mentioned, and our work focuses on developing and promoting policies that empower older consumers to make sound financial decisions as they age. We work to identify emerging risks to older consumers, and we work to coordinate consumer protection efforts with other federal agencies and state regulators. And we have a ton of free resources that are targeted towards older adults, as well as financial caregivers and professionals who interact with older adults, such as credit union staff.
You know, the thing about the CFPB that I like is it's all about consumers, and it's about protecting them. It's protection. And that's what we're talking when we're focusing in on scams and fraud that target older Americans. It's how do we educate these older Americans to be able to recognize these scams, and what to do if they feel like they're being victimized or if they have been victimized, and also how to protect themselves so that they don't become a victim. So, Kate, regarding financial scams and fraud, what kind of trends is the CFPB seeing at the moment? Are scam attempts like this on the rise? Are there any particular scams that you see as being the most prevalent?
Well, unfortunately, losses due to scams tend to rise every year. But in terms of trends, it's really important to look at what payment methods criminals are using to steal money from people. And that's because we know that if you send money using certain methods, like via a wire transfer, a gift card, or a prepaid card, you're much less likely to recover any of your losses. And based on the Federal Trade Commission's 2022 Consumer Sentinel data, although credit cards were the most popular form of payment used in fraud reported, they resulted in relatively low dollar loss. And by contrast, cryptocurrency and bank transfers are resulting in higher dollar losses. And I think the contact method that criminals use to reach their targets also matters. For example, higher percentages of people who are contacted through websites, apps, social media, and online ads or pop-ups reported losing money to that fraud. And although these contact methods were less commonly reported to the FTC than other methods like phone calls or texts, people were a lot more likely to lose money when they got contacted online. So in terms of particular scams, one that is constantly growing and evolving is the romance scam. Now, this isn't a brand new scam, but there are a lot of new twists, so I just want to touch on a couple of those. And just as background, the top category of fraud reports that was received by the FTC in 2022 was imposter scams, and that includes romance scams, as well as family member in need scams, IRS scams, tech support scams, and other types of scams where that criminal pretends to be someone else. In romance scams, a criminal starts what seems to be an exciting new relationship, and they shower their target with affection and attention for a long period of time, but eventually they begin asking for money. And these crimes are often perpetrated by organized criminal groups. The criminal might say that they are in the military, or they're on an oil rig, or another type of international business to explain why they can't visit you or why they aren't more accessible. Then they usually fake an emergency. Maybe they say they need money for an accident or a medical procedure or to travel to visit you. Or more recently, often these criminals are pretending to teach you how to invest in cryptocurrency or other investments. So it's a combination of the romance scam with an investment scam. But in all of these cases, they tend to build trust over a long period of time. And going back to some of the recent data on fraud, one thing they found was that very high percentages of people who were targeted by investment scams reported monetary losses. And the largest median losses of all scams occurred for investment scams as well. So again, that combination of the imposter or romance scam with an investment scam can be really devastating for people. So some of the ways that you can recognize this if you're working with a member who comes in talking about it, or even a family member or friend who you might be talking to, one of the biggest tip-offs is that new love interest or that new friend is now asking for money, maybe for an emergency, maybe for travel, but they're asking for money. It's also important, as I mentioned earlier, to consider how they're asking you to pay, because these criminals often ask you to wire the money or to send it via a gift card or prepaid card, or they may even try to get direct access to your bank or credit union account. And in one of the recent twists on this scam, they're increasingly asking people to pay by cryptocurrency in addition to using other payment apps or services like P2P payment apps, person-to-person payment apps. Criminals like using a lot of these different types of methods because it can be really difficult to trace these types of transfers, and often it's impossible for people to get their money back. So to help folks protect themselves against these types of scams, you can let your members and your friends and family know, don't send money, don't give access to your accounts to someone you have not met in person. Limit that personal and financial information that you're sharing, both directly with a new contact, but also online, because if you have a lot of this information in maybe a social media profile, a criminal can look at your profile and create a fake profile that has a lot of your interests in common. So they might look at, for example, a Facebook page, and then they would pretend to love dogs just like you, or have that same favorite sports team, or have other similarities with you. So if you're sharing information online, it can unfortunately be used against you.
You know, and that's the biggest culprit of all a lot of times, is that today with social media, we share so much about our personal lives, about, those in our family, our loved ones. And that's all great material for scammers to use, when they mount their plan to try and contact, an older adult and try to persuade them and force them into doing something that they really should not do. When you look, Kate, at all the resources that the CFPB has to offer designed to protect older adults from becoming a victim, would you share some of those resources with us?
Our Office for Older Americans has issued a lot of different reports and recommendations and resources over the years. So in 2016, we released recommendations for financial institutions focused on how they can prevent and respond to elder financial exploitation. And in this resource, we recommended that financial institutions watch out for unusual behavior by their members and customers. And we list a lot of red flags of elder financial exploitation to look for. There's information there on how to develop internal policies and procedures related to elder financial exploitation, and also information about how to train your staff on this topic. We released an update to those recommendations in 2019 that was focused specifically on how financial institutions can report suspected elder financial exploitation to the appropriate authorities like Adult Protective Services or law enforcement. And we've also issued some analyses of suspicious activity reports filed by financial institutions on elder financial exploitation. And we have a new report on consumers' recovery of funds after they had their money stolen via elder fraud. We also have a couple of resources related to trusted contact persons, one that has recommendations for financial institutions, and then one that is a handout on trusted contacts for consumers. We have a whole guide for elder fraud networks, which are networks that bring together key stakeholders like credit unions, banks, law enforcement, adult protective services, legal aid, and other key stakeholders to fight elder fraud. And that guide has a lot of resources, so if you are interested in joining or establishing a new network, that's a great place to start. In terms of consumer-facing materials, we have a ton, as I mentioned, but I will just touch on 2 today, and you can find a lot more on our website, as you can find all of the materials I've mentioned at consumerfinance.gov/older-Americans. But Money Smart for Older Adults is our educational program. It's really plug and play. You can take what we have and apply it in your community without having to create anything yourself. And it's designed to help older adults identify scams and prevent them. And credit union staff can use our fully scripted instructor guide, our PowerPoint, and the accompanying resources to present this program for older adults in your communities, or you can just order print copies of the resource guide to hand out to your members. And you can order those materials and anything I mentioned today for free in bulk from CFPB. I also want to mention our Managing Someone Else's Money guides. We've got guides for 4 common types of financial caregivers about how to manage someone else's money. And those include agents under a power of attorney, guardians, trustees, and Social Security or Department of Veterans Affairs representatives. These are really great to order and have in your office to hand out to older members or their loved ones who have questions about these caregiving roles like power of attorney or guardianship. And again, you can also order these for free in English and Spanish. I'll stop there. I know that is a ton of resources, and you can find them all on our website.
Beautiful. And Kate, your website again is?
consumerfinance.gov/older-Americans. You can take a look there at all of the resources that we have available. And you can also join our mailing list there for our Office for Older Americans so that we can send you updates about new resources or new research from our team. And then if you have questions, you can reach us anytime by email at olderamericans@cfpb.gov.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kate, for all that valuable information that you provided about the CFPB and all the resources that it has to offer for protecting older adults from financial scams and fraud. Thank you for being with us today, and thank you all, too, for joining us and listening. Stay safe.
If you've enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to follow One-on-One with Walt Laskos wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to send comments to walt@laskoscommunications.com. And to learn more about how you might support the prevention of elder financial scams, visit laskoscommunications.com.